What?
Yeah. .6 It's February 21st, 2023, and we are down in the mill. We are going to hold a workshop of the Lake Stevens City Council tonight. And it will also be, we're doing this also on Zoom, and this will be later published on our YouTube channel. So with that, since it's a workshop, I'm going to hand over the reins to Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 4 discussion items on the agenda tonight, followed by executive session. So we'll dive into our first discussion item, which is the Creator Zone presentation. Welcome, Amy Lewandowski, to the podium.
Thank you, Angie. Hi, Council. Hi, Mayor. Hi, City. Thank you all for your time. Real quickly, my husband, Brian, and I and our 2 kids moved to Lake Stevens about 6 years ago. So although we don't have generations within this community, we have very quickly integrated ourselves and we've fallen in love with Lake Stevens. We are a part of just about every single club that this city has to offer, from Lake Stevens Rowers, the Open Water Swimmers. My husband is the president of the Lake Stevens Ski Club. I'm an active member in Rotary. I'm responsible for hosting blood drives on a regular basis. We support Hungry Hearts and the food bank. We've adopted Lundin Parkway, and our family has a couple of small businesses, and we're also a part of the chamber. All of this being said is to say that we are here to stay and raise our family in the city of Lake Stevens, and we genuinely want this community to thrive. This is why I was so thrilled to meet Chris Smith at Rotary and to learn his idea of the not-for-profit community space called the Creator Zone. It is exactly what our families here in Lake Stevens need. So my role has been to engage and include the leaders of our community. We have met with school teachers, the Boys and Girls Club, Robotics Club, the Interact Kids, the Career and Technology director at the high school, artists. We've met with the leaders at the museum as well at the library, Snohomish County YMCA, and Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So everyone is really excited and agrees that Creator Zone bridges the gap for our youth and brings self-worth, opportunity, and belonging when it's needed the most. So now we're ready to share our project with you all, and we're hoping for your support. So with that, I'm so excited to introduce to you the founder, Chris Smith, to give you all of the details about himself and Creator Zone. So Chris.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you, counselors, for having me tonight. My name is Chris Smith. I'm born and raised in Seattle, and I'm a recent implant into Lake Stevens. I have 2 little girls, one's 3 and one is 6 months old, and we just wanted to come find an amazing community to raise them, and Lake Stevens has just been an incredible place so far. We've been here for 1.5 years, and we absolutely love it. I'll give a little quick background on myself and then what we're doing. So I always had this side of me that wanted to be creative and be an entrepreneur and to do something. But growing up, I just didn't have the opportunities to be able to necessarily go to the same schools and have the same privileges as others. And I fell into a bad crowd and had an interesting childhood. But there was a program that Microsoft hosted when I was 13 or 14 years old, that introduced me to entrepreneurship, introduced me to being able to program and taught me about modern technology and the creative arts. And it just changed my life. The problem with it was only 7 weeks long. And at the end of that 7 weeks, I was inspired. I was super creative. I had all these great ideas. And then I just kind of went back to the way things were. And thankfully, though, I had a mentor who really kind of latched on to me during that time and actually excelled me and pushed me. And I ended up getting an internship at Microsoft when I was 16 years old. And my kind of career blew up from there. So I became an entrepreneur. I created a pretty wildly successful startup, went through Series A and Series B round with some large venture capital funds like Madrona Venture Group in Seattle, and ended up selling that business to Ticketmaster. And now I am a senior engineering leader at Meta or Facebook, running the entire release engineering org for the company globally. So basically, whenever your phone updates with Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp, that's my team pushing the builds out globally. So it's been a wild life, and I really can connect it to that one moment in which I had that opportunity to break out of where I was and learn about technology and everything that it has to offer. Next slide. And next slide again. So that takes me today. One of the biggest dreams I've had for a long time is I wanted to bring that opportunity I had to many others and other underrepresented members of my community, but also the entire community as a whole. And I didn't want it just to be a single program that's only a few weeks long, but a physical place that people can go to all the time and get this amazing kind of creative inspiration, be able to learn, experience new things, and work with other volunteers and makers in the community to actually foster this kind of amazing environment for our teens and our young adults and everyone to thrive and grow. Next slide, please. So what we did is we founded a nonprofit called Creator Zone in Washington with this vision: to engage the practical expansion and application of STEM skills, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, that may lead to meaningful vocations, to encourage invention and the future thinking necessary to improve our tomorrow, to grow individual capabilities, critical thinking, and self-confidence. Everything we do is at the root of that vision. Next slide, please. So what Creator Zone is it's an open co-working, co-creating space surrounded by high-tech equipment and low-tech equipment. We're going to have a bunch of different stations and equipment and technologies available, from textile, where you can learn to sew and screen print and make your own clothes, but all the way to VR and mixed reality and screen printing and 3D printing and laser cutting and video and photography. We're going to have recording studios for podcasts and music. We're going to have a creative, quiet room for people to be able to focus on wellness and to decompress. It's going to be a community space for everyone, beginners, experts, entrepreneurs, and it's going to be filled with expert makers. So we have partnerships, which I'll go into in a moment, with some very large companies in this area who are actually bringing in experts who will be on site to teach our community and to help people learn and be inspired by the different things that we have to offer. Next slide, please. So some of the things we're going to have, we'll have an audio video recording studio. We're going to have engineering and robotics, photography with green screens and all the high-end computers to do the editing. We're going to have a VR mixed reality lab. Next slide. We're going to have 3D printing, lasers, textile, a full art room, and access to experts. So it's going to be just this huge creative space. The space is driven on 3 principles. The first principle is be a community, and especially a team gathering space. It's about embracing diversity, inclusiveness, and bringing a place for people to inspire and help each other grow and be the best they can. And that's what really makes a community thrive. When a community works together, inspires each other, helps each other, especially focusing on our young kids and our teens to help them become the best adults they can, the community thrives. When there are economic downturns, which we all know is a big concern we've all been going through and will likely continue to go through for a while here, entrepreneurship and people learning to develop their own skills to make a living for themselves when jobs might not be available are a critical thing for a community to thrive. We want to support and grow all of our social services to help those, but we also want to make sure we're teaching people how to become self-sufficient and develop skills to be able to create their own jobs. And that's at a root of our principle. Next slide. We also want to provide modern, new, and high-tech equipment. So this is a really big one for me, being a big technology nerd, but also it's critical. A lot of places in our community where you might say, oh, you can go to this particular place and get access to a computer. Technology is growing at such a rapid pace right now that if a computer gets donated today, within 12 to 24 months, that computer is basically irrelevant in the job force. The amount of time you have to stay up to date with technology to be relevant in the modern job force is astronomical. And what's happening right now is a lot of organizations are teaching old skills on old equipment, and then you're not as relevant or competitive in the market. So one of the things we're working with all of our donors and partners is on a 2-year recurring donation pattern, meaning that when we make partnerships and they donate equipment, we have an ongoing agreement where they continually refresh our equipment every 2 or 3 years, depending on the equipment. So we will always have modern, up-to-date equipment for our community to stay up to date. And then the last one is be impactful, make a positive impact. Go back one slide, just no worries. It is as it explains. Everything we do, we want to make sure that it's having a positive impact on our community, which means we're deeply getting engaged with the community, creating partnerships with a lot of our community organizations to make sure that what we are offering is relevant and what the community actually wants and what people are getting a lot of value and impact out of. Next slide, please. To that, we've already started forming some amazing partnerships. Already, we have over 50 volunteers in the local Lake Stevens specific community, from different creatives and artists and construction crews. And just recently, Sherwin-Williams donated a crazy amount, all the paint and labor to do the entire building, fully donated, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we have big business partners. We're in a very lucky place being in the Pacific Northwest. Some of the biggest tech companies in the world are headquartered here, and I've been able to leverage my relationships of my past. So we have big partnerships with Meta, Microsoft, Google, Boeing, who are actually donating the equipment, refreshing the equipment, as well as providing the expert staff and volunteers to teach our community and help run the things. We also have some awesome local organization partnerships. The Rotaries fully come on board. We're one of their primary support organizations this year. They're also all volunteering. But more importantly, we also have some cool partnerships with the library system. So the library is actually looking at having Creator Zone run some of their services in the library, like the maker and technology spaces within the new library that's being built. But additionally, we're going to offer library services within Creator Zone, especially around the technology learning section. So they have contracts with LinkedIn Education, where if you have a library card, you can get access to that material. That's all going to be done on kiosks and stuff within Creator Zone. So it's a really cool partnership we're forming there. And then also the Historical Museum, we're starting to work with them. And one of the really cool ideas we've started kind of brainstorming is for the exhibits within the museum, actually having the exhibits built by community members inside Creator Zone. So we can have this really cool kind of full circle partnership within the community. And then a bunch of other organizations like the Y and Boys and Girls Club, we're starting to partner with as well. Next slide. So plan and timeline, we've obtained a space. It's a 6,000 square foot building actually right in Frontier Village. We got extremely lucky. As you all know, space is very limited in Lake Stevens, but there was an old church called Lake Church right across from Wendy's. They just moved out and we were very lucky to secure that space. Lease is signed. We've got it started renovating. We've completed all demo. Like I said, Sherman-Williams has fully painted it, and we got flooring going in next week. HVAC, electrical, everything is all done. So we're super excited. Space is done. We're on track to open in spring. We've secured our key partnerships, including all the equipment and material donations. So we have everything we need to fully open the space, including the funding to complete the space, build out the space, and all of the equipment on that refresh basis. We already have also started engaging with the community and getting this kind of wider connection. We've met with the high school. So we've got several groups at the high school, like the robotics club is going to use Creator Zone as an alternative space when they're not able to, because they only get like two sessions a week that are 30 to 40 minutes long to actually build the robots. And a lot of kids get super excited. Now they have another place to go to actually chase that passion and build and do even better. And so we're really excited with the partnerships we're building within the community. So the last goal is we have a little bit more fundraising we're trying to do and then open doors in spring. So we are moving very fast. So last comes to, of course, our ask slide, the fun slide. So like I said, we have raised all the funds to open the space, get everything going, and also all the equipment is fully donated. But we're now at this stage where we're thinking about how do we support the ongoing expense of having an open space available to everyone. So our goal is kids, teens, anyone in the community can just show up, nothing in hand, and go create, go learn, go be inspired. We don't want this to be where someone has to go and spend hundreds of dollars getting materials and equipment to come to the space to be able to use it. That defeats the purpose of providing something that's inclusive for everyone. So to do that, we want to basically be able to welcome anyone in the door at any time, regardless of their financial situation. To do that, we're basically trying to raise, for a lack of a better term, like a scholarship fund. So anyone can come into the door and basically say, I can't, afford materials or anything. Can I please come and use the space? And we can just say yes, no questions asked. That's basically the last step of the funding. And we would like to ask the city council if that's something that potentially you guys could help with, or if you guys have any other partnerships or relationships that you think we could work with to secure that last bit of funding. Last slide. And to end it, I just want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate all the time. You can go to creatorzone.org or Creator Zone HQ as our Facebook page to learn more. Of course, you can email me as well. And I also would like to say, we'd like to invite all of you or individually, all of you to come up to the space, get a private tour, learn more about what we're doing. And then also March 10th, we're doing a kind of a sneak peek opening of the main space so people can come and learn. It's a last minute kind of premiere event. And we have some invites that we'll hand out to you all after this as well. And the director of Creator Zone, Jennifer, is here as well. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's time. I don't know if this is a Q&A type session, but if not, I'll be around afterwards as well. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions before this?
So I do. I would love to see a budget projection for you guys and like staffing model to understand. And I do know Mackenzie Bezos has donated billions of dollars for groups like this. She is local. And I'm not aware of any projects that she's donated to locally. But in reading about her philanthropy, this is right in the wheelhouse of what she supports.
Amazing.
And she responds directly to some of those responses. So she might be someone that might be interested in helping.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your information with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Please, yeah. I'm gonna go afterwards. Great, thank you. Next discussion item on our agenda is the short-term rental briefing, and I believe Russ and Jill are gonna lead us through that.
All righty. It's been a little while, but we're back today for a briefing on the short-term rental code amendment. The purpose of this amendment was to minimize public nuisance, preserve the availability of affordable housing, and allow property owners to permit regulated temporary accommodations. So again, that code was about 25 years old, so we're modernizing it. We're taking it up to modern day. Since there's been a whole bunch of new platforms for short-term rentals that have come out in that time. So over the past 2 months, the Citizen Subcommittee has been hard at work formulating a draft. That's been included as attachment 1 in this packet. The process started about a year ago, and we've held 3 work sessions at the Planning Commission before ultimately moving to a public hearing. 2 previous work sessions were held with the City Council. We also reached out via letter to the property owners currently operating short-term rentals in the city. Council then held 3 more public hearings and 3 work sessions to discuss the drafts. At the most recent public hearing back on November 15th, 2022, the council passed a motion to create an advisory committee comprised of citizens, planning commissioners, and council members. Some of the citizens there were short-term rental owners, while others were neighbors of short-term rental owners. So it ended up being a mix of folks. The Citizen Subcommittee held 4 meetings between December and February of this year. The agendas for each of the items, for each of the meetings were included in attachment 2.
Hey, Jill, can you go to the podium?
Oh.
Yeah, Jill, just hit the podium. Great.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry about that. I can be
No, that's okay. You've got a great
quietish.
quaint voice, which is wonderful.
So the Citizen Subcommittee held 4 meetings. Those were between December and February of this year. So the agendas of the 4 meetings were included in attachment 2 of the packet. They created a great purpose statement that we included in the code draft itself. That's found in section A1. And then in the discussions, the subcommittee discussed items such as hosted versus unhosted rentals, the permit process, noticing requirements, separation requirements, and a cap on the total number of short-term rentals. So I also included all the comments that we received throughout the process in the packet. They're roughly organized by oldest to newest. So out of all the comments, we received comments from 27 unique commenters, 9 of which were in favor, 18 of which were not. The city attorney also reviewed the draft and provided feedback, which was incorporated in. Russ, did you have anything to add?
Not at this point, but I'll reserve comments.
Okay. So since Councilmember Kim Daughtry and Councilmember Dickinson were on the subcommittee, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, not right now.
No, not right now.
Okay. So I'm just going to go over the code draft, just kind of a high level overview. So like I said earlier, we did work to develop a purpose statement that reflected the goals the subcommittee had discussed. One of those goals was limiting corporate impacts to residential neighborhoods. The other was preserving the housing stock, minimizing public nuisances, and allowing property owners a path to allow temporary combinations within their homes. So that purpose statement is in 1A of the code draft. The subcommittee decided pretty early on that weddings and large events should not be allowed. So additionally, only 1 STR is allowed per parcel. So section B of the draft goes over what is needed to obtain a license. The permitting system that was selected would be an annual license. That annual license again has to be renewed annually, and it's non-transferable between property owners. So number 2 of that subsection requires that short-term rentals be separated by 500 feet. And again, that would be measured by closest parcel boundary to closest parcel boundary. And so this is to prevent several short-term rentals from clustering in one location. The subcommittee also decided that the total number of STR licenses shall be limited to 30 total, with no more than 10 of them being in the waterfront residential zone of the city. Further down in number 4, it goes over application materials required. The subcommittee chose to utilize the type 1 permit process with the additional noticing requirement. Noticing would be administered by the applicant on a form provided by the city. And that would go out to all adjacent property owners. So we do intend to remove the part about penalty of perjury, because again, it's not a criminal offense. And the worst thing that could happen would be we revoke their license and then enforce penalties based on what is in further on in this code.
I'm just curious how that made it even into the draft, or how that even came to be. I mean, that's a really serious penalty. I mean, you're looking at prison time for perjury and for a violation of city code. So I'm curious how that got in.
I believe this section was adapted from the city of Encinitas, California. I think that is correct. Russ, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
We're pulling stuff from California for Washington State. That's what it can be done.
So a couple
Let me
sections.
just add that it's not an uncommon on applications of different things to provide. Because you want the people who are filling out the questionnaire to provide you with honest information to say, I swear that the above statement is true and correct, and this statement's made under penalty of perjury. Now that doesn't, what that means practically is that, that if you lie on something that's meaningful, and whoever it is, in this case, the city says, hey, we found out you lied. This information wasn't true. We're revoking your permit. Because of that, the person can't basically come back and say, well, gee, I just didn't really look into this. And I didn't know for sure. I thought that was the case, but it's really more of a statement that tells the person, please be careful how you answer this. Whether the city would attempt to turn it over to law enforcement to have somebody actually prosecuted, that's not necessarily what this means. But what it says is that you need to be serious about how you fill out this application.
And so at this point, we're just recommending that we take out that language so there's no confusion. The intent is that shows up further in this ordinance. We just want you to complete your applications correctly, and the penalty for not filling out your application correctly could be revocation of your permit. So we're not looking to have any criminal infraction embedded in this. So it's just our recommendation to strike that language.
Okay, moving on. So number 8 of that section, the applicants would need to submit photos of their fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and the subcommittee opted to do kind of a self-certification versus a staff inspection. So moving along to section C, that goes over the general operation requirements. Number 1 requires that an owner or operator lives on premises for at least 240 days of the year, or has a primary residence within the Lake Stevens urban growth area. And again, primary residence is defined in our definition section. We are adding a definition for that. And so when the owner isn't on premises, they would need to designate a local contact within somewhere in the Lake Stevens UGA. Number 2 prohibits utilizing overwater structures, temporary structures, open land, and RVs as short-term rentals. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that somebody can't park an RV at a short-term rental property. That's not what we're intending. It's the rental of the RV itself. And then number 3 limits the number of guests to 2 adults per bedroom, excluding children under 6 years old. That was adopted from the Langley Code. And then number 4 limits the number of rental parties to 2 at any time.
Does that conflict with the familial status? I mean, we're limiting how many people can be in a bedroom, whatever it is that doesn't have any implication that goes along with violation of familial status, how many people can be in it as well?
No,
No, it doesn't.
no, this short-term excuse me, rental ordinance and the provisions that it provides is not subject to the federal or the state legislation regulating housing. And so we can make provisions such as this without violating the laws against discrimination. And this really doesn't prohibit people with families coming, which is why the language was suggested, no more than 2 guests excluding children. So if you've got small children and they can occupy the same bedroom, it's not going to exclude that family group. As you recall, somebody brought that to our attention that could be a possibility. So that's the intent of that language.
So what would be the mechanism for enforcing that? Are we gonna have cameras? Like what, I mean, seriously, what are we going to do to enforce that? I mean, why are we including things in this ordinance that are really unenforceable?
Well, I don't know that it's unenforcement. It's say somebody rents the house and they've got 12, it's a 2-bedroom house and they've got 12 adults show up and they're sharing the house for a weekend. If the neighbors note that, police are called and they can see who's there and how many people are there. If they go to the house and there's people with sleeping bags out on the, that's how you would collect that evidence. It's going to be just like most code enforcement items, a complaint-based enforcement system.
So we're gonna burden our police department with people who might be sleeping in sleeping bags out on the deck.
I don't know. That's your decision. That's whether that's a burden on the police department. I don't know. You'll have to ask them, but it would be enforced like any other code enforcement matter. The violation would have to be drawn to our attention. We're not going to send the police out, I suspect, to knock on the door and for every short-term rental to make sure it's complying. There would have to be a complaint, probably from a neighbor.
I wonder if we want to have staff finish the staff report and then have questions and discussions after she's complete.
Okay.
Great, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to number 4. So number 4 limits the number of rental parties to 2 at one time. And again, this was a carryover from the previous iteration of this code. Number 5 requires that the good neighbor guidelines be posted within the short-term rental. This is also a carryover from the previous iteration. And then again, these are really designed to limit those nuisance impacts. Number 6 requires that a minimum of 1 off-street parking space per bedroom be provided. When the owner operator is present, the standard 2 additional stalls also must be available for their use. The permit modifications section is found in section D, and that was one of those that was adopted from Encinitas, California. It allows the director to grant modification requests based on hardships that are directly related to physical constraints of the property. We also go on to define nuisance activity in subsection E of the code. This was adopted from Encinitas as well. Section F is the complaints and enforcement section, and it should look pretty familiar. We did add number 4 that states that permits issued based on applications with falsified information may be revoked. And then as part of the amendment, we're also updating our definition section in 1408 to match. I won't go through all of them, but we have included definitions for boarding houses and long-term rentals. And that's really to differentiate them from short-term rentals. And since we no longer need separate definitions for hosted and unhosted, since the current draft allows the owner or operator to live offsite, but within the UGA, we have just one definition for short-term rental.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Russ, did you want to add anything?
I'll just shortly state that really what staff tried to do is we worked with the different groups, especially as we got to the Citizens Committee. We really tried to highlight to them what some of the big issues of the Planning Commission had been, what some of the big issues of the City Council had been, and then what were some of the new takeaways from that group to make sure what we presented back to you brought forward the flavor for all of those groups, hopefully into a workable ordinance. A couple of the issues that, you've struggled with tonight. Each group has struggled with, what is the makeup of a rental party? That has been a lot of the consideration. And there's still probably some room to modify that in that all the cities we've looked at handle that differently. A lot of them use the 2 adults per bedroom with some other allowance for small children. Some ordinances are silent on that matter. So there's probably still some changes to that. But again, we really just tried to look at this holistically, let each group ask and answer the similar questions and come back to you with this recommendation. And we're just hoping that council members Daughtry and Dickinson can provide some feedback from participating in this group as well.
Thank you. Questions from council or staff?
I have a question.
For each other?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So just regarding the process, Russ, is this document that we have here, it's not labeled anything, I guess it says short-term rentals on it. This is the staff's recommendation or interpretation of what the citizens group is brought forward. Have they signed off on this? Is this authored by that group, or kind of how did this get devised? I guess.
So the document in front of you is the draft that staff worked on with the advisory committee over a couple of meetings with their input and recommendations. And at the last meeting, they did buy off on this document to move forward. It's gone to the Planning Commission, who's reviewed it. They had a couple of comments, one related to that section that Jill mentioned with the section that had language about perjury, not the intent. So the Planning Commission has also reviewed this again and is generally supportive of this version of the code that's in front of the council tonight.
So when you say generally supportive, the Citizens Committee has given their stamp of approval on this essentially.
Correct. And the Planning Commission is the one I said generally supportive. They didn't take an official action. There was at least one planning commissioner that is opposed to this, but was also opposed to any regulations from the get-go. So that's why I say generally supportive, but they all felt that it reflected a body of work over a long period of time.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, just so that I can be clear. If I own a home in Lake Stevens, one home, and I want it to be a short-term rental, the way I'm reading this is I have to live there. That has to be my primary place of residence for 8 months out of the year. And then, or for 240 days out of the year. Is that right? And then for 4 months out of the year, I don't have to live there.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then, but it can be a short-term rental all year round. So while I'm living there, I could choose to rent out a bedroom or two. And then while I'm not living there, I could choose to rent out the entire house.
That's
As
correct.
long as I have someone locally who will be the point of contact while I'm not living in the area.
So if I had a relative's home, my grandma, grandpa passed away and they have a house in the area, I would not be able to rent that out.
You could if you also live in Lake Stevens and that house is also in Lake.
Right, we
Stevens.
added an exception for like the example of the citizen has been coming and saying, we have our primary residence and then we have another residence on the other side of the lake that we can see across the lake from. So we added an exception that if you have your home within the Lake Stevens urban growth area, so that's actually larger than the city. So you're close by, you're able to attend to issues and problems that occur, then that 240-day requirement is waived.
Marcus, it's in section, sorry, C1.
C1, yes. So that would allow that person to continue the short-term rental. No, they do not occupy the short-term rental property.
They can have 2 short-term rentals in the city. Is that what I read? In that case, yes.
Well, potentially they could. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't think this is a big deal, but I look at parking of boat trailers and recreational vehicles only allowed when adequate parking is provided on site. So they're not allowed to park their trailer at the boat launch during normal hours. They're not allowed to park it in an area on the street. Isn't that why we pay taxes, is for people to be able to park their boats in areas if a neighborhood allows it? Why is it that only if there's adequate parking on site, why wouldn't you park it on site? But they're not allowed to park it in public right of way. We have people park trailers in the streets and everything else. Why are we talking about boat trailers? Why that under section 6, number 2? Why are we limiting people where they can and cannot park? There was adequate parking on site. Why wouldn't they park it off site? Why can't they park it anywhere that's a common area element for a community?
So just from conversations with the different groups, again, the idea is just not having impacts on neighborhoods. And so if there is not adequate parking on the street, you don't want to be creating a hardship. And really it was just the idea, if you're coming into this facility to rent it and you have a trailer, an RV, that it should just be able to accommodate the needs of that party, not at the potential detriment of the rest of that neighborhood. It doesn't say that you can't, park it at the boat launch or anything like that. It's really just in that immediate neighborhood would be the idea that you're not creating new impacts.
But wouldn't you have to show as part of the permit that you have parking access?
Yes.
And then, so how do you, if I don't have parking access, how do I show the city that, hey, if I'm going to suggest to my tenants that they can park at the Davies Beach boat launch and pay for that? Would that be okay?
Not under this. It says, unless you have adequate parking, you can park it anywhere.
So is that part of being adequate parking?
Well, that would be part of our initial review. You have provided parking based on your bedroom count. If you have a large lot and you have an extra area on your lot, yeah, if you want to rent to somebody who's bringing with them an RV or a boat and the site can accommodate that, great. Otherwise, that can be up to the owner of how they screen on who their tenants are.
But that could nullify them getting a permit if not having enough parking actually on scene, correct?
They would have to have parking for the bedrooms. This is beyond the parking for the guests. It's if they want to bring large recreational vehicles with them or vessels, that the owner of that site should be making accommodations so it doesn't potentially become to the detriment on the public street if there's not adequate, if there's not a parking lane in a neighborhood. A lot of neighborhoods only have parking on one side. They're very limited because of widths of lots. So it's more just a practical matter that not wanting to put them on the immediate street.
I see lots of neighborhoods where people are making detriments by parking boats, recreational vehicles on the street as it is. Why this for these people? Why I own a home? Why shouldn't I be able to have a guest park a trailer there? Why are we putting this on short-term renters when the whole neighborhood's doing it?
Well, again, we can only speak to this use and not trying to, part of the conversation we've heard throughout this whole process has been, impacts to neighborhoods. And so just trying to be thoughtful of that continuous line of thought about how are we thoughtful to neighborhoods and not create overflow issues. Again, it's not a deal breaker by any means to have this language in here or not. It's just trying to recognize that adding this other complexity may create additional burdens to this greater neighborhood.
I guess is when I look at this, it's more prohibitive than neutral. I mean, it says in here that there should be no. It sounds like kids running in a yard, yelling, shooting each other with squirt guns would be creating a public nuisance, and thus the neighbors could call the police, and 2 kids yelling, screaming, having fun on a summer afternoon day would create a nuisance. According to this.
I don't think we've interpreted our code, our nuisance code that
Well,
way.
a nuisance noise may include but not limited to yelling, screaming, shouting, or transmission of a loud amplified noise.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how, but then what happens is what I'm nervous about is an extra neighbor who doesn't want short-term rentals next to them says, oh, I hear a noise. I'm going to call the police because 2 kids are running around yelling. But technically under this is a nuisance.
And I want to piggyback on that. We have a neighbor to neighbor dispute. We have their public comment. And it's a tit for tat. And we're trying to base our code in part on a neighbor to neighbor dispute, which may or may not end up in court for them to resolve their issues. We don't need to get involved. Our job as a council is not to draft an ordinance to address neighbor to neighbor disputes.
Yeah, well, the language was, because I wasn't a part of the committee, but I'm just recalling the discussion here at the council. There was concern about compliance with our nuisance code and making sure that people who both rented short-term rentals and who were the actually doing the renting were made aware of those code provisions. So those are incorporated into this draft ordinance, as I can see. It's basically our nuisance code and giving people some examples of what might cause that to happen. And children on a summer day running around, if they squirting with squirt guns or running through the hose or whatever, if that call got to the police department that somebody's, that's not a violation of our code.
Well, why wouldn't we just say we have code that addresses this? Why not just say we have it? Why go so overboard when we have a code that addresses this already? Why go so into detail and make it so meticulous that any little violation can constitute the loss of a use of a property?
That's it. It's a policy decision, whether you want to include that, whether we should draw back on that and just reference the nuisance code. You could, but
I'm just curious why we're going so overboard when we have a code that already addresses this.
all right. Well, I'll let people in the committee.
Well, I'll tell you why. We had someone stand at that podium and said, I should be able to sit on my back porch and read a book in total silence on the lake. And I can tell you that that's not gonna be the case. People rock out with their boats, blasting music, people naked peeing off their boats, all kinds of crazy stuff on the lake that happened that's not currently enforced. And then we're going to focus on someone yelling or squirt guns or whatever. I struggle with that. So that's the reason why that's in there, is we had people saying they want to be able to sit on their back porch and read in total silence. And I don't think that's reasonable.
Sorry, I have a more practical question, I guess, just because I'm new to this whole process. So like some of my fellow council members, I do have a lot of notes on this. What is the preferred landing point for those? Because I appreciate that, city staff have looked at this, but they weren't the original drafters. Council, who would benefit the most from receiving detailed feedback and notes that we have on this as far as updating and correcting, or at least trying to incorporate some of that feedback?
Oh, staff.
Okay, so
Absolutely, staff.
to the staff, not back to the commission or anything like that.
The commission's work is done.
Yeah, commission's over.
So I
Okay.
guess my question is, because I experienced this from the initial subcommittee, that the recommendations that we made were not acted on in good faith. And so is there a mechanism where all the council can be apprised of the recommendations so that we're all aware in real time? Because I just know that there were adjustments made that weren't part of the initial subcommittee, and I can tell you that there's things in here as part of, I participated in two of the third and fourth subcommittee meeting, community subcommittee meeting. There's recommendations in here that are different than what's the conversations that I heard, and they're pretty significant. And so that's part of the reason why I said I wanted it published. I want to record it and publish so we could have documentation of it, so we could have the citizens to listen on it. So.
Well, Councilmember Ewing, that's exactly why I asked if the subcommittee had bought off on this particular draft, because if that's the case of what you're talking about, then they haven't bought off on this.
So let me give you one example.
Okay, please.
The max number of rental unit licenses. One member of the committee suggested a percentage basis. 1 to 3%. And then when they realized how many units there were in the city, they're like, wow, that means there's going to be like 500 of these units. That person, based on their previous experience, probably should have known what that number was or close to it, but they, for whatever reason, they didn't. So the conversation happened. 30 and 10 was brought up, and there was mixed feedback. It was 50-50. One group suggested at least 50. And then one group said 30 and 10. And somehow 30 and 10 ended up on here. There was no debate. It was just, they took the more restrictive number. So I was the one that asked for the number of units in the city. So we have one lakefront for every 40 properties, one license. But for all the other folks that don't have the privilege of living on the lake, it's 720 units. And so that's a little confusing to me. How that we were talking about following, numerically and things. And I don't see, that was just an arbitrary number, but it was completely, we went from 500 to 50 to 30 in the course of that conversation.
Why don't we ask our two participants in the subcommittee as to what?
And why why do we have a lakefront residential? It's okay for lakefront residential to have this, but everyone else in the cities can have a different. Why are we making a 2 different class system here is being my question.
What we were trying to accomplish with this entire conversation on the 1030 was we were trying to limit how many we have in the city based on what we think we could get away with the courts that are coming out with their decisions on doing things, and not having commercial entities coming in and buying up all our housing stock. That's where this all comes from.
I'm not sure I understand by what we can get away with.
Well, there's a couple of court cases going on in the 5th and 9th district right now that are talking about whether we can do anything on short-term rentals at all, and especially on owner occupied. I think the 9th Circuit was the one that said you can't do that at all. Is that what it was?
The 5th said.
That was the
The 5th or the 9th Circuit said there was no way you're not allowed to do owner occupied. I can't remember which one it was. So the basis of the 10 and the 30 was trying to make it to where we don't have commercial entities coming in and buying up all the properties that they can buy up and turning them all into short-term rentals. That was the basis of that conversation. The 10 and 30, I thought that's what we did land on. That's the way I remember it, but okay.
I can tell you as a planning commission, I'll let you finish. I apologize.
No, I'm done. That's all I really need to say. The other thing I want to say though is, we've gone through all this process for over a year, and we can play all the what ifs that we can play. We can play it over and over and over again about all the what ifs, and what if somebody wants to bring a boat in, where do they park it? We can do all that stuff over and over and over again. We're not going to write into any of that code. This code, the way we tried to write it was to be as general as possible and still give them rules to regulate what's going on. That's what we tried to accomplish with this. And, we can change it. I mean, it's just an ordinance. It's not adopted yet. We want to change some things. But we're trying to put together from all sides that were on that committee, everything we'd heard in the past, everything in the planning commission, we tried to get it all in there. And we did that in 4 meetings, and we thought we came up with it. If we didn't, great. I don't care. I'm not married to this. I'm not. but we tried to do the best we could to get everybody happy enough to where we could get a short-term rental code in here. That's what we tried to do.
My question would be is, backing off what you said, Steve, is we have 0 places other than one little bed and breakfast. We have nowhere else for families to stay in this community. People come and want to stay in here. We're going to limit to 30 plus units in this.
Okay,
community.
so where the 30 came from is to have more than what we already have, which was, I guess, 28. It could be 50. I don't care. It doesn't matter. The other conversation that was that came out about that was, okay, well, let's do it this way for a year and see if we need more. It'd be the same thing. We came back on the marijuana regulations for how much we had under canopy and said, well, we're not using it. Also, let's just bring it down again. So it could be that we don't have 30, come back in a year and say, well, let's limit it at 20 if there's only 15. Or it could be, we've got a lot of people that want to permit this up and we'll figure out where we want to go from there. But
If we don't have any, it sounds like we don't have an issue. So why be so regulated?
I don't care. Put it at 50.
I think the issue is,
It doesn't matter.
but to rate, Ted, to set a number so that after this ordinance is passed, we don't all of a sudden have 100 or 500.
Exactly. That's the point. Yeah, but the point is to not allow commercial entities to come in here and try to run rampant over what we're trying to do, which is everybody's all worried about in all the jurisdictions. All the jurisdictions are worried about it because it's happening. So we're trying to figure out, and I don't care what the number is, it could be 50, it could be 62. I don't really care, but it's got to, we think it needs to be limited to where we don't have that happening. So we had 28, we stopped at 10 and 30.
Quick question for us. If there's a number set, let's say it's 30. Is there a mechanism to track over a year's period of time? Here's how many people wanted or were interested in pursuing a short-term rental license that we couldn't issue because we were already at our cap.
Yes, and
That is our
we
intent
discussed
to
that.
create a database of all registered owners and those who would like to be if
Okay.
we don't reach that.
And is there also a mechanism to track the number of short-term rentals that are owned by individuals versus LLCs or other business?
We will have
Corporate.
the ownership information on that database.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also curious as to why we chose someplace in Sonatas, California, instead of working off what's going on around us. We're picking Ensenadas, California, which seems so arbitrary to me, instead of looking at what we're doing, the county's doing, the other counties around us. Why are we going to some specific spot in Ensenadas, California?
Well, I don't think that that's the point. I think the point is we looked at all of them and they took some verbiage out of one of them and it just happened to be in Sonata.
How much verbiage do we take from the cities and counties around us?
Does it really, I don't think.
How much
that
do we take from
matters.
the county? I mean, we just incorporated from the county, right? I mean, we just incorporated a lot of the county into the city. How much verbiage do we take from the county?
From the county, I can't say, but as Councilmember Daughtry is stating, we looked at lots of codes. There's a spreadsheet that we put together that shows similarities, differences of different codes. And I think as Commissioner Connor Davis said from the Planning Commission, who was the representative, we kind of cherry picked amongst all of these sets of code to try and bring forward language that hit all of the high points that people were asking for. So it was, looked at language from Washington, we looked at language from Oregon, we looked at language from California.
Kind of change the subject a little bit here, but I'm always been curious as to why we don't treat short-term rentals as commercial enterprises. The IRS does, state of Washington does. You have to get a business license in the city. So when it comes to inspections, you're allowing the public into a single-family home. Why we wouldn't have that inspected?
Well, there's a couple of thoughts on that. So under the city's current code, we allow home occupations, and that's something that the advisory, the Citizen Advisory Committee really did want to make a distinction of what's a corporate interest, what is still sort of a home occupation and fits in with the neighborhood. So that was a lot of discussion. And as a home occupation, it's a lower intensity type use. And so at the end of the day, they thought self-certification was satisfactory, that they say, yeah, we've provided life safety health items that would be necessary for a residence, which is different than if we were to say that it's no longer a home occupation. You want to look at your use matrix and you are considering it a full-blown commercial use, then absolutely they would have to be brought up to beyond residential standards to full commercial standards, full ADA compliance and a variety of other things. So right now, they haven't moved over into what would be considered a commercial nature, both under the building code or the way we're defining it as a use. Still a home occupation.
I believe there's been some litigation across the country with regard to that issue of whether short-term rentals can be classified as commercial, and that several ordinances provisions have been struck down based on property rights, and that the rental of one's property is not a commercial activity under any traditional means of definition. So and tramples on their property
Short-term rentals is not,
a
so there's
commercial
no
activity.
distinction between short-term rental and a long-term rental then?
Not for, a long-term rental is not a commercial activity either.
Exactly, I realize.
Well,
that.
yeah, so
That's
it's treated the same, yeah.
I was under the impression it follows the use, which is residential.
That
was the interpretation that I read.
but it's not a commercial,
I agree. with you.
Rental.
It's a residential. It follows a use.
Yes,
So
right,
short-term rental
right.
is a residential use.
Right, yes.
According to the,
right? Yeah, I was just responding why it isn't, why we don't classify them as a commercial use, because it's not a commercial use.
Russ, is the next step to bring this ordinance to council for a vote?
Yes,
No, I would suggest a public hearing and then a vote.
Public hearing.
a public
Thank you.
hearing, yes, was
And
Yes,
thank
there
you.
is.
But to take action on this ordinance.
correct.
So
Is our hope.
I think there's enough concern with the current draft that I don't think it even gets to a vote. And to Councilmember Donahue, his position, how do we provide that feedback on things that we're concerned with? I guess I want to be clear. I respect and appreciate the work that Kim and Mary and the other folks did, the two meetings. There was thoughtful discussion. I have different views on things and that's okay. My biggest beef, my concern is that the most restrictive things that were discussed amongst all the party members were taken. So there was not one single thing that allowed for more flexibility in the use. The 500 feet is one, is another thing that was brought up. There was a much lower number, the actual number of total uses was brought up. The area where the local contact is, that number that was brought down significantly from what it was discussed from one meeting to the next. Those are just three that were just to the most restrictive possible, and to Councilmember Tadge's point that, it's just it doesn't make sense to me that there's multiple discussions, different points, 50, for example, 50 and 30, and then we're going to go with the 30, not even a compromise to 40. We're just going with the 30 and 10. And to Marcus's point, this is supposed to be a community Lake Stevens ordinance, not a Lake Stevens waterfront zoning ordinance, which disproportionately favors, the 300 to 400 units that are on the lake. And we were told that it wasn't an ordinance for the lakefront homeowners, but the numbers suggest that that's the case based on the number with this current draft. And that's really a way of limiting that. So there needs to be a mechanism for us to provide feedback to city staff. I don't think we're going to come to an agreement on it, but I've got several notes and I think there's other council members that have their input. But I think we need to have more input. It's not gonna get to a vote, a satisfactory vote. with the current draft.
So I guess I want to ask the question again to council members Dickinson and Daughtry. Is this document that we have in front of us? Does the community group that gathered together, is this the document they're putting forth?
Yeah, there was a couple of verbiage changes in that. Yes, this is what we came up with. There's a couple of verbiage changes in it from legal, but other than that, it's pretty much what we came up with.
Okay. It is.
I have one other follow-up question. Excuse me, Ross, are there any current uses? It says no uses over water. Are there any uses over water if someone's using it? And I don't understand over water, where someone couldn't use their property as an Airbnb. We've got
Shoreline Master Program strictly prohibits any type of residential use or really any enclosed use over waters like a houseboat or something like that.
Is there any units on the lake? Because isn't there one person who has a house that sits over the top of water?
And so
Say again?
I was just going to say the distinction would be a legal use. So if anybody comes into us and shows that they have a prior permit, a vested use from Snohomish County, permits from the city to do that, we don't have any problem with that. It's
And this
those,
verse doesn't look at that.
No.
Okay, because it said no over water use.
right. And again, it's going to be a little bit more astute than that we have to look at all of the angles. So if it's an allowed use and there's a history that it's an allowed use, we are not taking that prior use away from anyone.
Wait,
It's
just want
just-
to make sure that
Yep.
was question.
Just to be clear, though, it specifies in here partial overhang over the water. It's not,
That's what I read too.
yeah, it says partially, so that's what I see in here. I don't see any mechanism for grandfathering another use, so that was one of the concerns I had as well, as if any properties fell into that partial category.
Yeah, just you have to read the whole ordinance in sort of context where there's discussion of legal established, uses in other parts. So that's always a determination we have to make. Is something legal? Is there a history of that use? And then,
I would just hate to see us put something where someone's got a vested use doing their.
Yep.
And then say, sorry, what we did.
Okay. Okay, we can,
It'd be simple enough to add a clarification there to that section.
Well, it sounds like we wouldn't need to.
Yeah. Yep.
Saying, correct?
Well, and a lot of my notes stem from that. Maybe it's occupational hazard, but the first thing I do when I get a document like this is, where is it vague? Where can I exploit it? And so there's a lot of areas I saw where simple clarifications would help. I mean, the group that did this did a great job. This is a lot of work, but there are little areas I noticed where some clarifying language would help, and that's the type of feedback I would like to provide.
okay.
Let me just, if I may speak.
Please.
I appreciate this input. It's huge. I do appreciate it. And we're game to make this work. It's wearing me down that we go on and on and on. But you know what? In the end, I think we're going to be able to do this. So thank you for all your input. And let's get it done. That's all the way I feel about it right now.
So Russ, for council members who have additional feedback, does it make sense at this point for them to direct that feedback at you? And would there be an opportunity for a redrafting, or does it make more sense to bring this through a public hearing and a vote and to address those concerns via amendments?
That's really the council's pleasure, but you can definitely send me your written comments and I will show where they are, but let's hand it over to the mayor.
Rather not do that. I don't want a bunch of different comments going to Russ, and Russ is accused of did or didn't bring it into the ordinance. You guys need to figure it out.
I would suggest as a procedural matter that those comments for changes be brought up at the public hearing, so that the public hears them and people can respond to that. So then after the public hearing, then you can decide in your discussion what changes you want to make. And we could make those changes without having to have an additional public hearing, because those issues were brought out in the air and people had the right to comment. That would be a more efficient process. I think.
Thank you. One thing that we heard when we met with the planning commission was their disappointment that when we had concerns the first time, that we didn't send our concerns back to them and have them do the work of incorporating those concerns or not into an ordinance. So another avenue would be to put those comments together, to send those back to the planning commission and ask them to incorporate this document that we received tonight and the comments and concerns that we continue to have.
I want to make sure I'm clear, because that's what I was trying to get at with my original question is, where should this all go? And I've heard, to staff, I've heard.
We're still figuring it out.
Okay, as long as I'm up to speed with everyone else, that's all.
You're in the same place. we are.
Okay.
It's all good.
I
Okay,
mean, procedurally, we start with the planning commission. They make a recommendation. There's workshops and interflow with the council.
right.
So there's feedback along the whole way. It goes to the public hearing and then, adjustments are made. So this one, we just had a lot of sort of loops and that's okay. I'm just trying to figure out.
So after a detour to a committee.
So what he's not saying there is that I screwed up
No.
and put this commission together when we should have sent it back to the planning commission, and I recognize that after the fact. And I will never do that again. But I think that what you're saying, Council President, is that we should get everybody's notes, get them together, get it sent back to the planning commission. I know they're not gonna like it because they don't want anything to do with this anymore, but and then bring it forward like a normal thing.
I'll say this, Kim, I think it's great that it went to another community. I think it should have gone to plan, but I think it's great that there was another group of input. We had a lot of. I think the goal is to get something that's in the middle. I think having the committee and you guys there was another committee that was formed to try to put something out, wasn't quite like, this doesn't sound like it's perfect. I think it might be right to send it back to planning until we get a draft that the council can say, yeah. We give and take and we get something out of there. I think having another committee in a group, why the planning department maybe didn't like it so much, that was good.
I would agree with that, Kim. I agree wholeheartedly. I'm grateful that it went to the community subcommittee. There was really good work that happened there. My concern is that the most restrictive elements were plucked. And I'll just give you an example because I'll call out the two planning commissioners that were there. One said 50, one said 30. They went with 30. And so you have two people that had different views on things and they went with the most restrictive one. That's my concern. It wasn't, why didn't they say 40? There was no compromise. It was just, no, this is the way it is. And I'm the chair, I get what I want. That's not the way it works. There's got to be some kind of discussion.
I think one of the benefits of going back, of having this be between us and the planning committee is we all have an opportunity now to see this and to send our comments back to the planning committee. If they come back, if in those comments, I'm going to use this example. We say, many of us say, we want something larger than 30. And they come back with a document that says 30. We then have the opportunity to either make an amendment or to not vote for that ordinance. And then it goes and then send it back to the planning committee. So I think this is our opportunity to tell the planning committee from this document. Here are sort of the things that we can't sit with, that we don't believe are the best elements for our community.
Okay, so.
Hate these microphones. So what I'm hearing everybody really say here is that we want to send it back to the planning commission with everybody's comments. So a comment that you might want to make is something about, I thought it was going to be, you had 30, you had 50, there's no compromise. I'm concerned about that. So you send that concern to the planning commission. You have your concern about the things that you talked about. There might be some clarifications that you want to see in there. You send that to the planning commission and let them handle it one more time and see what comes through the process. But I think is important in this whole thing is that, okay, we've gone through this whole rigmarole of over a year plus two committees and the planning commission and the whole works. We send it back to the planning commission, get back on process. That's what I want to do. I want to get back on the normal process and have the planning commission make their final recommendations, have it come through that normal process and then we're good. Hopefully, we'll see what comes out of it.
What is the best way for us to get our feedback to the planning commission?
I would say at this point, if there are to be additional specific written comments that you would like in front of them, I would suggest, and you're gonna hate me, Kelly, that you send this to the city clerk so that there's a positive record of that. And then when staff puts their staff report together, we can send that information to the planning commission in its native form, and they can see what the direct concerns are. And then it'll take a couple more meetings with the planning commission. But we can do that, and then they can bring back find recommendations.
Thank you.
Probably
And-
seeing 2 or 3 more meetings, but.
Thank you. Today's February 21st. What should be a reasonable timeline for us to get that information to the clerk?
The 2 meetings in March are full, so it's probably an April meeting that it would go back to the planning commission.
So 2 weeks? that-
You're talking about the information from
From us to.
Yes.
Yes. I just want to make, I just want to
Just
get.
wanna have an
I-
endless stream of information going to. it
Exactly.
on
I'd
it,
like to have a
going
container
forever.
around how much time.
Right.
we have to-
2 weeks.
March.
I mean, you guys have identified what your concerns are. And you've attended most of the STR meetings, Steve, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you got your concerns probably written down already.
So is that Tuesday, March 7th,
We were actually just saying maybe March 15th,
March 15th?
Wednesday, March 15th.
So that's 3 weeks.
Yep.
Seems.
Sure.
Any further
Made a decision.
concerns?
Yes, just as the new guy, I would also say, I'm not opposed to us hammering this out. I just didn't want to drag everyone through my minutia. But if when it comes down to it, it's our decision. So if we have to sit here and we get something from planning commission and we need to finalize this, I'm happy to sit here until it's done. I just didn't know if that's the process.
As an old guy, let's send it back to the planning. commission.
Okay.
We can do that. We're gonna have this very same conversation in 2 months when we get it back from the planning commission, because there's gonna be differences that we have. I mean, I appreciated the thoughtfulness of the subcommittee, and I'll get hammered by the planning commission more than I appreciated the thoughtfulness of the planning commission. I thought there was more give and take. I thought there was more thoughtfulness, I think, is the best word that I can come up with. I really appreciated thought and the varied input from the citizens, especially was good to hear. And that's why I like to hear that. And you know, Kim's hard on himself. Kim, you did a great job. You spoke out a lot. You did a very good job of presenting information, you know, even information I didn't agree with. You did a very good job of presenting that. So please don't be hard on yourself. I mean, I thought the subcommittee was successful. I mean, there's some differences in here. I personally, it's a personal thing. I don't like when we are a nanny state and telling people what they can and can't do. It's like when we had COVID and we were getting calls from people telling us to arrest kids in the park because they weren't wearing masks. You know, that didn't make sense to me. It didn't seem like a good use of our city resources. And so I think we shouldn't miss the point. The subcommittee did excellent work.
I don't think this process negates that. I think that the subcommittee has come up with a document that, you know, that they've worked hard on, and that really has, you know, to Councilman Daughtry's point, incorporated parts of all of the work that's happened before. And I think the direction to the planning commission can be, here's a document that we'd like to work off of, and here's our feedback about things we'd like to see addressed. And then maybe we are back here 2 months, but then we're, to Kim's point, we're in a process, and there's a process by which we take that document and we have discussions about that document and we move forward. And I think getting back to what that process looks like at this point makes sense.
So we provide our feedback to Clerk Chellan by March 15th.
Thank you, staff. Much appreciated. Moving on to discussion item number C, the 2023 comprehensive plan docket briefing. I'll turn it back over to Russ.
Okay. Thank you, council. As you know, every year we set a docket to look at items in the comprehensive plan. This year, we're proposing a fairly minor docket. It has 3 items. There are two map amendments that are initiated by the city, and then a private map amendment as well. There would be some text amendments. So the first map amendment would be to redesignate the property attached to the Cedarwood Community Center from a residential land use designation to public, semi-public. That's just more of a housekeeping item. We've already identified that facility in our comprehensive plan as a special use park. So it is already a park. It's just having the land use designation and zoning catch up with that property now that it's in city ownership. The second one is going back to the 97th area. Last year, there was a lot of debate between the council planning commission about the properties off 97th. And council ultimately changed that back to a residential designation. What we found out after the docket was completed, the property on the southwestern corner of those properties directly attached to the remaining commercial properties had purchased that property for intent to develop it for a commercial use and didn't realize this change has happened. So we had lots of conversations with them. And I told them that I would bring that back in front of the council to see if you wanted to reconsider that and add it to this year's docket for that one parcel only. That wouldn't be any of the parcels directly on 97th, just off South Lake Stevens Road. And then there will be some minor text amendments that usually include updates to the capital facilities plan as we go through our SEPA review and any of just those purely housekeeping things. And then the citizen initiated land use designation and zoning change would be for a property off of Lundin. Back in 2008, these folks had asked the council to designate that property mixed use over the intervening years. That property has never developed as mixed use. That property has a lot of constraints, being next to Lundin Creek, right off of the road. So they're asking that it be redesignated back to a residential use so they can use that property and potentially get more units out of that in the future, but immediately they have no plans except to live on that property. So that is the extent of the docket. Staff wanted to keep it really tight this year so we can try to start focusing on the 2024 docket, which is going to take about 18 months for us to get through. So just wanted to bring this to the council tonight. We've already shared this with the city council, or excuse me, with the planning commission. Not a lot of input from the planning commission at this point, other than they were fine with carrying these items through. And just for the new council member, when you're setting the docket, it's not a decision. You're not making any change. You're just agreeing that it has enough merit for future study. And then it will go through an entire public process, come back to the council and the planning commission at a public hearing, and then a decision sometime later in the year. Since this is a very limited docket, we hope to expedite it and have this back in front of the council for action June or July of this year.
Okay, thank you.
So just looking for any feedback tonight from the council before we go to our public hearing. Council members Peter Shagan and Daughtry.
Can you clarify the parcel on this South Lake Stevens Road? Because there's no north-south road to reference here. It's
Is it
just
yellow one?
Yellow one or the red?
The yellow one.
Yellow one. Okay, got it.
And on this attachment, Highway 9 is on the left border of the paper.
Let me find the exhibit, please.
That was my same question.
Yeah. It is. So it has, it has one building on it already. I'm looking at it right.
Isn't there a stream corridor that goes down the middle of that property?
So which parcel are you looking at? Which the city? So are you looking at attachment 2 on page 258?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, so the stream corridor would actually be on the, I'll say the left side of the red properties, right next to Highway 9.
Okay.
So the stream corridor does not go on this property. It has a current residential building on it.
So the yellow is the parcel that
The
you're
yellow is
talking
the
about.
parcel that we're talking
Okay.
about.
And I didn't take it that way when I first looked at it. I thought it was a red parcel.
No, that one's already zoned commercial.
Right.
And so the yellow is asking for that to be zoned commercial as well.
Right, to go back from the commercial, go back to commercial.
Because we just made all these residential.
Right.
All right.
Yes, we did.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions for staff? Any concerns about moving forward? Great. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
Discussion item D, Police Department Strategic Plan and Annual Report. Chief Zizo.
Thank you, Madam President. So our annual report just got finished up for 2022, and we're excited to present a couple of different things the next couple of weeks to you. Our Employees of the Year and Officer of the Year, plus some Materius awards that we'll be handing out. I will be seeing you guys in the next couple of weeks. We also have a new officer starting on March 1st, which we're excited about. My colleague to my right has been very, very busy trying to recruit and hire. And in fact, that's what he's doing right now. So I really appreciate it. He's put a lot of effort into our strategic plan this year as he began last year in January with our agency and has worked through this year with our staff and other members of our community, business members and other things to get our strategic plan written up for 2023 to 2025. First, I'd like to go over the annual report, which is our accomplishments from 2022. I won't go through everything in the sake of time to get this out of here as quick as we can, but I just wanted you to be pointed out that in 2021, there was more than 600 officers that left law enforcement profession in our state, which is significant. We have a lot about feedback of how many officers we lost in with LSPD, which were 5 due to retirements. We have a lot of staff that are getting to the age of retirement and leaving our agency. They're not leaving to other agencies to go work there. Also to point out, 42% of the time we were at minimum staffing. That means we had 3 officers on during a 12-hour shift. That is very significant. We've gone now, we probably have beat that record since the start of January. We've been on level 2, which is a less priority or more priority calls that have to come to us before we can even respond because of our staffing levels. We're working hard right now. We have one that's starting in March, and then we have 3 that are in the background phase right now. That we're working through, and hopefully we have another conditional offer that we just gave out. So we are working very hard to get our vacancies filled. We have 8 vacancies alone in patrol and support services and investigations. Plus we have 4 members that are going to be on extended leave for 4 to 6 months minimum. So you can see our staffing levels are getting worse than getting better at this time. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot you were drawing that up there. Sorry, Kelly. Thank you. This is our, or go back one, Kelly, there. There's just our org chart. It's kind of blowing up there, but you can see all the vacancies that we do have listed. We do have one that's in a field training right now that'll fill one of those vacancies. So that's why the number is a little bit off. It's showing 37 that are total staff right underneath that, Kelly, if you roll down. And then we have 30. There's one of them will be replaced after he gets off field training. The one lateral officer that we just hired will go through a short field training and then be deployable. So that's what we're finding. And what's been nice is, as Jeff's going through this, and Jeff could tell you a little bit about the recruiting, is we're finding local folks that are born, raised here. That's the majority that we're finding. The people, there's one person we are looking at right now is from out of state, but they're moving out here. They're finding really that they want to live in Lake Stevens and work in Lake Stevens, which is unique in our profession. We don't always have that happening, but we do have that happening at LSPD. So keep going down, Kelly. This is our calls for service for last year. During the pandemic in 2020, there was a little bit of spike due to the online reporting status, the different frauds that were happening and stuff like that. And then 2022 kind of leveled it out. And then 2022 or 2021 leveled out. 2022, we've seen just kind of a stable. It hasn't really increased or decreased. One thing we do have is a little bit more of the domestic violence that are occurring, which is why we brought on the DV advocate group that Jeff was talking about earlier. Overall, this is our operations. One more down there, Kelly, if you just move down a little bit. It's the next page, sorry. A little bit of delay. We had 23,429 incidences. That's people calling 911 and also proactive patrols. You can see that in 2020, into 2022, that we're seeing a decline, both in the crimes against people, crimes against property, and crimes against society, which is good. Keep going down. Yeah, it's kind of, sorry, you're on a PDF, Kelly. One of the biggest things that we did deploy this year was our drone. We had very good success with the drone and implementing that for different events. Our school resource officers are still a very viable piece in our schools. They're working very hard. They turn into the Marine units, which our Marine unit is still 13 certified officers. But with staffing and the amount of overtime right now, it's very hard to fill the Marine unit overtime. Go ahead and go all the way down. Our investigations unit right now, we have about 1.5 detectives. We have one full-time detective that's been in there for a few years, and we just have a new detective that moved in January 1st. And right now we're down 1 vacancy, and then we have 2 on extended leave in that unit. So we're trying to work through that. Go ahead and go down, Kelly. This is our records unit. This is the people in the front office handling all the requests from body worn cameras to public disclosure requests to pistol transfers to concealed weapons licenses. As you can see, all that stuff is increasing. And just in the last 3 years, every one of those increased except for the concealed pistol licenses kind of stayed the same. So they're doing more work. They did over 900 and some public disclosures this year, as we talked about at the retreat. That's huge. That's a lot of work that goes into this. Body worn cameras are not even on there because we just implemented those in October. So that'll be another stat we show on here. We're moving all the stats that you see here online. We're working with a group from Snow 911 and another officer from Everett PD to put all these stats online so it's transparent to our community. They know what's happening, what they're doing. So we're excited about that. Here's the retirements that I spoke about earlier. We had the 5, I think it's 5 right there. Yep. And then our new hires throughout the year. Jeff was one of them. We promoted some folks down on the bottom. Next year, we get to honor these 2 individuals for the Employee of the Year and Officer of the Year here next week. So, and then go ahead and go down, Kelly. And then again, this is kind of just our recruitment, what we're doing, going out there and trying to recruit, getting on the website and getting involved in the community. We have a website, we have flyers, we have our tent that we do for recruiting. We're trying to do that as best we can, but it's just our people are finding internal people that want to live here, that want to work here. And that's what's working for us right now. So we have how many candidates right now, Jeff, just about what we're working through?
We have a total of about 37.
Yeah. So. Anything on the annual report? All right. Kelly, you want to go to the strategic plan for 2023 to 2025. So the strategic plan is for a 3-year period. As Kelly transitions over here for me. Yep. So our strategic plan started the development of our mission statement was in 2019 when Chief Dyer was here. We started to get community input, business input. We got our local emergency responder partners, everybody together. We ended up coming up with our 3 initiatives. Organizational excellence, professional police services, and community interaction. We continue to work towards those initiatives today. As we go through this, each one of them is broken down into the initiative and where it falls within the initiative, the mission plan, because it's most important that our folks know what we're doing on a daily basis, and so does our community. So if you scroll down 1 there, Kelly. These are all broken down. This is the background, how it all started, and then how the initiatives came about. Go ahead and go down to the next one. I'll just save you some time without having to read everything. This is our mission statement is right here. And then how did we get there to today from 2019 to today? Go ahead and go down to the next one, Kelly. We redid our functional charts within the agency. We added the office of the chief, and then we have operations, and then support services division, and then administration division. So we have divisions, and then underneath that are the work units and stuff. And who's responsible for what? It just helps with the workflow process. If you're asking about something, where does it need to go into the right person? So it gets directed to that. So both Julie, my administrative manager, and Deputy Chief Young, they have that divided in, and they know where to divide the work down as it goes down the chain of command. Here's our 5 top priorities and goals this year. Number 1 is always public safety and crime prevention or suppression, is doing the day-to-day operations of patrol. We go out here, we handle the calls for service, we're proactive, we're working with the businesses and stuff and trying to reduce crime. One of the things that we did this year is called AEPs, is active enforcement patrols, where the officers get dispatched to a call of a high crime area or a high call area. just on a 30-minute basis or an hour basis. They just go, it gets them drawn there if they're not answering other calls, and they go into there, they do our observations. They're finding out as they did this across the county and down in Linwood, the crime is reduced. So the officers are getting dispatched to those areas, going over there. If they get called to another call, they get put on that call and then go back to just the area checks. They're kind of like security checks, and they're finding out very good success with those. Traffic safety, as you know, we're down our traffic officers, but our patrol officers are trying to be proactive and continue the traffic safety part of that. As we all know that traffic safety is important. We do lose over 700 and some people in the state of Washington this last year, which is the highest fatalities we've ever had in the state of Washington. Our wellness program is we got to take care of our folks that are doing the job. So we're looking at different programs and implementing those. One of those is a WASPIC Cortical app, which provides resources to all of our staff, just not the officers, on wellness, nutrition, all the different resources, mental health providers, and those kinds of things. So if they need to call somebody, they can pull up the app and call somebody if they need to get that direct resource. Hiring, recruiting, as we've already talked about where we're at. And then again, department cohesiveness. So is this broken down through these next slides? Is just each priority setting and then each priority and what's we're doing for our benchmarks and who's responsible for this. This is an all the time operation for us as public safety and crime suppression, traffic safety going on. Go ahead and keep going down. Let's go roll through real quick here. Developing a meaningful wellness program to implementing recruiting and retention fulfillments, to building a cohesive resilience team through communications and collaboration, a reaccreditation. So we go through reaccreditation, just like Public Works is going through right now. We'll be reaccredited in 2024 with WASPIC. Again, our citywide records management program. I have my records manager, our administrative manager working on this with the clerk's office and other partners like IT. We're supporting that. We're doing looking at all of our technology within our department because there's so much technology. We are inundated with technology in our profession right now. So we're trying to look to streamline that, including the body worn cameras and working through all that because that's a new system for us. Keep going. And then working on all of our policies to make sure we're following the industry standards and working through all that, plus the training, leadership training, and all the stuff that goes along with that. Again, our investigations and making sure that we stabilize our investigations unit because the staffing model right now is not good. And then our community interaction. Every day we're out here doing Aquafest, National Night Out, Polar Plunge, community events, health and safety fair, guns and hoses. And it's just being involved in all that too, which is different or separate from just the regular patrols we do. And then our biggest thing is our Explorer program. Is there, this gentleman spoke earlier about our youth and investing in our youth. We feel it's important to invest in our youth also. So Deputy Chief has taken on that and revitalized our Explorer program. Before the pandemic, we had over 19 Explorers. We lost all those folks during the transition of going into the military and graduating and stuff. We had like 2 or 3 left, and now we're up to 10. So, and they're very, very important, as Kim can tell you, for Aquafest and doing all the logistics of Aquafest. They play an important role into that, and it just helps build them to be future leaders in our community. So, any questions?
Chief, you mentioned you're doing the awards ceremony next week.
Yes, next Tuesday at the council meeting.
Yeah. Previously, prior to COVID, you always had an annual dinner and so forth. Are you not doing that? Reinstituting that?
No, we're not. Due to the fact that the fundraising for that, it's several hundred people trying to find a place to have that, trying to come up with to pay for it financially. And then we also did a survey with our staff. They felt that time for getting together was unique for us because we can never get together because we're a 24/7 operation. They wanted that time to do that. So we have moved the award ceremony over to the council now. So we can involve everybody here, our community and you folks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, you there? All right.
It's supposed to be 31 degrees.
I hate to say it, I gotta go to work, sorry.
So just a reminder, the Polar Plunge is the 26th. Mary, I, and Marcus so far are the 3 that have volunteered. Mary, you, and Mayor, that's right. You had said you were gonna potentially be there too. We would love to have the full council be present if at all possible. So, love to see all that. Chief, thank you so much. This is great information. It's great to see the strides that your organization has made, and let's get those openings filled.
Yes, we've got a goal and we're going to hit it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
So I've got a question and a comment. So comment is, I would like to thank the chief. I made a referral or someone for our police department, and that person has been well received and has had favorable feedback about the hiring process. And so I don't know where that candidate will end up, in the process, but it's encouraging to me to hear feedback from applicants, to hear how the manner in which they're treated, and relative, especially to other, agencies. And so that's encouraging because I know I have a lot of respect for that individual, and so I appreciate that kind of feedback in it. But my second, I guess my question is, Chief, I'm concerned about like the mental health of our officers. And I know there have been some of your staff that have gone to trauma training. And I know we have, previous to COVID, we had someone here that lives in our city that did a training to assist officers deal with, traumatic events. And so I'm wondering what part of your wellness program specifically focus. I mean, I'd love to hear, not now, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'd love to hear something definitive that's available to all of your staff, so that we can be proactive in addressing their mental health concerns. Because I think when their mental health gets diminished is when decisions, we get problems with decision making, and that's where we end up with unfortunate events.
Yeah, to answer your question first for the recruiting part of it, we did streamline our process working with HR. When we get the information now, they get pull it off the list on Mondays. By Thursday, it's going to the Civil Service Commission to get certified. Then it comes to the command staff. We go through the process. We try within 48 hours getting that set up for the next stage. And then we try to get them into the door the following week or the week after to meet with the command staff to do a quick interview. And it's really streamlining the process and helping us get through our applicants faster. So we're very, very proud of that. We did have some hiccups during the process of just getting the face-to-face, but we figured that out and it makes it better. And we're glad to have people, endorsing our agency and these people coming. And so we do appreciate that. That's what the best recruiters are, our community and our people that are working within our agency. Just to let you know, as those people come into the door, which I didn't speak on earlier, to hire somebody now that has to go to the academy, I can't get them into the academy until next January already. There's 200 people waiting to get into the CJTC Academy. We're trying to do a regionalized academy, which would bring about 60 positions throughout the year to these regions. Right now, they're looking at Pasco. They have one in Spokane. They're looking one up at Skagit Valley College. I've been working on the one here with 3 other chiefs of my peers here to work at Central Washington University because it's an established state college. So we have to go through Department of Enterprises and all this stuff for lease and pay and stuff. So it's easier if we already have a state established facility. So we're trying to work on that because like we say, we hire somebody today, they're almost 10 months to 12 months before they can even hit the academy. Then they have to come back to us for another four months to go on field training. So you can see if we hire somebody today, it'll be a year and a half before they're ready to go on the road. So laterals, people that already have the training, we're still getting a few of those. That's what we're hoping for. So to go on the wellness, yes, that is huge for us. And we've sent some folks down to San Diego for some wellness training. We're really established into the peer support team with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, who just recently supported us last month during our incident. And it is getting Cortico app established to give them those resources. We are integrated with that. We look at training. You guys do such a great job of supporting us with our training budget that we are sending people for those things. And it's hard because if you ever have an organization that's so small, it's hard for people to discuss things internally, right? Because it's so small, they want to be reaching out to other resources. So myself and Jeff have been working on those other resources. What do we bring here to give those people the confidentiality and the resources available to those? So we've been working with HR to get us a sheet, what's provided by our insurances, so we can give our folks that, because a lot of people don't know what the insurance covers and stuff. So we're hoping to do that in April. We're having just a real quick department, huge photo and getting some folks together to give them the resources that they do need and working on some stuff like that. But we do do have some other opportunities we can share later. So, and I want to open it up to you too. If you guys want to come down to the police department just to check in with their folks, please do stop by. Our officers do appreciate it a lot when they see new faces coming in, the council faces. Mayor shows up and says hi, and Gene does too. And I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to our folks. They're out here during the middle of the night. It's hard for them because there's officers that are on 8 months of nights out of the year and they don't see the day-to-day faces that we see. So it's very important to them to know. Thank you.
So Chief, on the academy, there was a bill in Washington. I don't know if it got out of committee or not on the academy over in, where did you say it was, Pasco?
Yes, that funding,
Did that get out or not?
it's still working through its process. Yes, it's still there.
So it's live.
Yep. They were going to hope to start the academy in Pasco in April. And I think that's been moved up to March.
So if we're trying to get another 2 academies, do we have to go through the legislature to do that?
Yeah, yes, we just put our proposal together for Senator Lovick, who asked that. We just sent that into him last Friday. So we got it on the forefront of it. So we're hoping that it'll work its way through this year. But if not, we'll have to wait for a supplemental budget probably and get it established, because Skagit County is the #1 place he wants to see the academy right now.
Great, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
I want to slide one other discussion item on the agenda really quick. There were a few of us that talked when we went to AWC last week about a trip to DC. I wanted to just gauge sort of the appetite of the council for a topic that came up. Last year, we were able to couple that trip with the Smart Cities Conference. So it was nice to be able to share the expense and couple that with another opportunity for learning. It seems as though this year there aren't really any conferences around that same time that would pertain to city business, city learning. However, the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County has a trip to DC planned for mid-May. And it sounds like it's not outside of precedent to have other councils kind of tag along with that group, and also use that as an opportunity to meet as a city with representatives. And so wanted to kind of throw that idea out there and see what people thought. Right, Mayor Gailey.
Yeah, I went on the EASC fly-in last year. It was a good trip. It was from an EASC standpoint, it's mostly elected officials and then business leaders throughout the county that attended, and we were able to meet with several of the congressional delegation back there. If we wanted to do this, we could go in with their meetings as well and be a more powerful force kind of thing, but then also schedule our own Lake Stevens individual appointments as well while we're back there.
So to clarify, did you tag along with
Correct.
EASC in their meetings with delegation, or were you able to meet separately, or?
Last year, I just tagged along with the EASC.
But this year you're proposing that we do both?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. If we do want to do a DC trip, this might be a good event to do so.
What were the dates again?
It's the 15th to the 18th of May.
I always say it's good to go down every year, just pounding the drum for the things that Lake Stevens needs, whether it's the trestle, funding, or roads, all those things. If we're not going down there, Marysville's there saying we need money.
Yeah.
And
We talked about this too with our new legislative, thank you, lobbyist Trevor, and he also felt like there was plenty of time to arrange those visits between now and then, and he has some contacts in DC that he could use to help kind of make that happen for us too. So he seemed to be supportive of that.
Yeah, and just to strengthen what Councilmember Taja said, we do have at least one, if not two federal grants right now that we're asking for money for things. So it would be good to go back and push those along.
I remember last year when we went, they were like, this is something that you should be watching for immediately.
Yeah.
And it was kind of some good tips that were there.
Yeah, and we've been able to work on those with these I think there's two that we have together right now.
So that's something that we would have our grant writer participate in too, since that individual is going to be
You mean to come along?
and participate in that. I mean, or at least hopefully that person will be on board by May, so that even if they aren't on board.
We could talk about that. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I just think it'd be a great opportunity to tag team with EASC in the sense that we are trying to hit the economic development button all the time. And that's the group that does it. So it would seem to be a great avenue to exploit that.
Yeah, and to compound on that, Gary, I'll tell you that the business CEOs that I was able to meet last year and get to know just gets them thinking about Lake Stephen, so you're exactly right.
Sounds like lots of support. Any opposition? Any questions?
Do numbers help?
What's that?
Do numbers help? You know, how many council members are there? Does that help?
Or whether it's
Bigger
2
game.
versus 7.
2 versus 7 or 2 versus 3 or 4.
I think it always helps, but
Gotcha. Good question. Thanks.
okay, well, I'll have staff work on that if that's a consensus on a look into it.
Sounds good.
Like the
Thanks.
DC.
Everyone should have a draft agenda for next Tuesday's meeting in front of them. Jean? Do you want to, any?
Good?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Draft agenda for February 28th, 2023. Under guest business, we'll have the police department awards. Under mayor's business, we'll have a proclamation.
Excuse me for a second, we might have two. For Ron McIntyre, he is going to send
Okay.
a proclamation and he can get it in right away, so.
Yeah.
We can get that done, because they do want to be able to read the proclamation at the flag lowering.
Okay.
In case anybody doesn't know, Ron
What was that?
McIntyre, who is a Navy veteran, longtime Kiwanian, passed away a couple weeks ago.
Okay, great. And the other proclamation is the Kathy Holder
Yes.
proclamation.
All right,
Under city reports. Under the community development, we have the climate mitigation plan. And we have the public works annual report. We have our consent agenda under public hearings. We have shoreline master program update. And the Sherlock rezone. Under action items, we have ordinance amending Title 10 parks. Any additions or deletions?
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Last item on our agenda is executive session. So we will be recessing into executive session to discuss litigation and potential litigation for our CW 42.30.1. There will be no action to follow, so we will adjourn the meeting following our executive session.
I think we're looking
No.
for 20 minutes to start. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll come back at 8:10, but when they do come back, it'll just be to adjourn. Okay, so the council has requested an additional 10 minutes. It is 8:10 and we'll be back at 8:20. Thank you. So the council's requested an additional 10 minutes. It's 8:20 and we will be back at 8:30. Mayor, we're back on. We don't need. All right, we are going to adjourn.